Alrighty, I am pleased to be joined by reoccurring guest Zack McKinnell from the Blue Bloods CFP podcast. How's it going, Zack?
Not bad, man. Not bad. Appreciate you having me back on the show, though, man.
Yeah, after the game actually we talked about coming on or you coming on before the game on Monday night, but that was a great game. But first of all, before we start talking about the college football championship from last night, as this recording is on Tuesday night, if you want to talk about a little bit more about your podcast, how we can get it, all that good stuff.
Yeah, man. We got it in podcast streaming platforms everywhere. We also do a YouTube show if you want the video version. We put a lot more content on YouTube. Our podcast version, we just put some of our stuff on there just because some of our stuff's made specifically for YouTube. We got player interviews, recruiting updates, game recaps, game previews. Man, we do it all over there. We're, in my opinion, one of the only podcasts out there that cover FCS, HBCU, FBS. We cover all levels. So if you're looking for the most well-rounded coverage of college football, man, check us out on YouTube. It's just youtube.com/backscore the Blue Bloods, and any and all podcast streaming platforms. It's just the Blue Bloods or the Blue Bloods CFP podcast, man.
All right. Again, all the links will be down in the description below like normal. All right, let's talk about the game from Monday night. Georgia comes up with the big win. I expected Bama to win, but what did you think about the game overall?
I think it was a game of momentum swings and a game that really established Kirby Smart and his staff as one of the better ones. I think the critique a lot of people had of Kirby Smart and the coaching staff coming in is they couldn't adjust to Alabama, because when you look at the last few losses that Kirby Smart and Georgia have had, it's their inability to adjust. When Jalen Hurts gets put in last minute, they weren't able to adjust to that. Tua coming in, hitting the 2nd and 26 bomb to eventual Heisman winner Devontae Smith, they weren't ready for that either. So for me, it really showed Kirby Smart made adjustments at halftime, and then that fourth quarter and second half was beautiful for Georgia, in my opinion. I mean, I don't think you could have written a better script. 20 points scored at the end. Keely Ringo with the giant interception of Bryce Young to seal the game. But you saw a physicality from Georgia in the second half that was missing the first game and a half, I would say, because in the first half, I didn't see it either, where all season long, man, the one word you could use to describe Georgia is physical, whether it be the defensive line, the linebackers, the offensive line, the running backs. Well, when you went into that SEC championship in early December, I didn't see any physicality. Alabama whooped them on both lines of scrimmage, and they had no answer for the wide receivers on the outside, which is another big storyline of last night. But for me, it was the physicality of Georgia was the number one thing I saw, in the coaching staff being able to adjust. On top of that, can we please, I know he didn't have a spectacular first half, but for Stetson Bennett, the journey is complete, in my opinion. Walk on, wasn't supposed to be the starter. DeJuan Mathis, gets the start first. He's benched. Stetson gets the job. He's benched for JT. Comes back into this year, wins the starting job over JT due to an injury, but keeps it all year and leads Georgia to their first national title since 1980. I know he, wasn't the most impressive Heisman winning quarterback, but he did enough to go down in Georgia history from a walk-on to a guy who is a national championship quarterback now. It's an amazing story if you're an analyst, a broadcaster, whatever you are, or if you're a fan. So let's give Stetson Bennett his props, even though he might not have played the best first half, because he got it done at the end of the day with that, though not the game-winning touchdown to Brock Bowers, but that one where Bama jumped off sides and he hit Mitchell just on a streak to the end zone. He put that on a dime in the end zone for Georgia to take the momentum. Stetson Bennett deserves a lot of credit, in my opinion.
Speaking of Stetson Bennett, I thought the only really bad play he had, and I didn't necessarily agree with this call, but I think it was in the third quarter, really the only bad play he had, where he was an incomplete pass. He was running away from the pressure. He was trying to throw it away, and they ended up calling it a fumble, and Alabama gets the ball. What did you think about that play? Because I thought it was an incomplete pass. They ended up calling it a fumble, but what did you think about that play?
I'm a little torn on it because I feel like the precedent was set with the Bryce Young play early in the game, where it was a very similar play where his arm was kind of going forward, but the ball was kind of ajar before his arm started moving forward. They called it an incomplete pass in Bama's case, but didn't seem to give Stetson Bennett the same benefit of the doubt. Now, I do think ultimately both of those were fumbles, in my opinion, but I just wanted to see more consistency, man. That was my thing. If you're going to call Bryce Young incomplete, call Stetson Bennett incomplete. If you call Bryce Young a fumble, I have no problem with the call on the field in the Stetson Bennett case. I thought they were very similar, but man, I thought that play, it really signified what Nick Saban builds at Alabama: the culture of never giving up on the play, the culture of being in the right place in the right time, where preparation meets opportunity and you're right there. And for that kid had no idea that that was going to be a fumble recovery. There's no way in the world. He just grabbed the ball and for some reason, just to be cool, just to go over the technique, drug his toe in bounds just in case, and it gave Bama a huge moment I guess momentum boost in the game, where a lot of people thought the game was over at that point. And I think I wasn't alone saying, man, Georgia's got a steep battle. I had multiple people text me, analysts across 247 and stuff, saying, yeah, man, I think this is a wrap. And Georgia responded, held them to, only one touchdown allowed, man. Let me say that. One touchdown allowed to an Alabama team averaging almost 50 points a game was outstanding. But man, that play was crazy. And if that would have cost Georgia the game, that would have probably given everyone in Athens nightmares for years.
Yeah, I didn't necessarily agree with the call, but Georgia did a nice job of rebounding, scoring a touchdown, and then I think right after that they scored 2 or 3. So, I mean, I didn't agree with the call necessarily, but it didn't end up haunting Georgia because they ended up scoring 2 more touchdowns after that, at least on the offensive side of the ball. Were you surprised that Georgia was able to really dominate Alabama in the fourth quarter?
No, because I mean, for me, I picked Georgia in both games. I picked Georgia for the SEC championship, wrong, and then I picked them in the national championship, and they finally proved me right. But for me, I thought they were going to out physical Alabama in the first place in the first game, because you saw LSU, you saw Texas A&M, you saw Auburn just brutalize that front five for Alabama repeatedly, get to Bryce Young, make them uncomfortable. But they did, outside of A&M, LSU and Auburn just didn't have the talent to win those games and close the door down the stretch. For me, Georgia had too much talent up front on both sides of the football to be pushed around by an Alabama team that really, outside of Will Anderson and Evan Neal, doesn't have a guy who should be winning their one-on-one matchup across the board. So for me, it was Georgia playing Georgia football, and it was the brand that got them to that point. And you finally saw them executed on the biggest stage. And that's what I've been screaming is, where was the physicality? Where was the power run game in the SEC championship? And I guess it took till the late third quarter, early fourth quarter for Georgia to implement that.
Yeah. Outside of Stetson Bennett, what other Georgia players were you super impressed with?
I mean, Brock Bowers, man, every time I see this kid play impresses me. That kid's a true freshman. And I don't think a lot of people are, putting that in their head. The fact that that kid has come out here, and with Darnell Washington, a 5-star, George Pickens, a 5-star, Adonai Mitchell. I mean, you have countless guys. You got a running back room that has more stars than damn near the American flag. I mean, they have so much talent on that offense. And for a freshman tight end to come out of nowhere and be the X factor week in and week out was so impressive. The 3-week stretch, man. And I beg people to go watch the film on this, from Georgia Tech to SEC championship to the Orange Bowl to the national championship. That 3 to 4 game stretch was some of the most impressive tight end play that I have seen in college football all season long. That kid is going to be a whole problem moving forward. And then also on top of that, I think the secondary, man, I know the wide receiver injury to Jamison Williams, man, it came out today, tore his ACL. So I'm hoping a speedy recovery for him. And of course, John Mechie not being there also, hopefully he has a speedy recovery. Keely Ringo and De'Aaron Kendrick played excellent games. And I think that stretches back even to the Orange Bowl, where De'Aaron Kendrick had 2 picks. A 5-star transfer from Clemson finally made his mark in the 2 biggest games of the season. And then the penultimate play, Keely Ringo picking off Bryce Young and taking it 70 yards with a convoy down to the end zone. And they're talking about hanging that picture in, Georgia Hall of Fame history or whatever you want to say. That the secondary really stepped up, in my opinion. And of course, man, what can we say about Nakobe Dean and that linebacking core? The athleticism, the ability to play sideline to sideline, to be excellent pass rushers every single third down. Man, if you go back and watch the film, they blitzed one or all the linebackers. Somebody was coming on a blitz every single third down because they were not going to let Bryce Young have time to throw the football. I was so impressed with the athleticism of the linebackers, and that was something that I really was questioning what happened in Atlanta in that SEC championship. But those are some of the players that in position groups that I was very, very impressed with this last night.
Yeah, speaking of Bryce Young, he ends up winning the Heisman, but he didn't have a great game against Cincinnati. He didn't have a terrible game. He had an all right game, but he didn't really play that great against Georgia either. But what did you think about the Heisman's performance against Georgia on Monday?
For me, I don't take anything away from what he did this year.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you know how many freshmen first year starters wish they could have a third of what Bryce Young accomplished this year. And I mean, the Cincinnati game, I don't really put it on him. That was a game plan movement. That was a game plan move by Saban. They got 2 All-American corners and the highest graded safety in their conference. We're not throwing the football on them, especially without our leading wide receiver and John Mechie being there. Why would I throw the football when I can run it down your throat and I know you don't have the depth to stop me? I don't put any stock into his stat line from the Cotton Bowl against Cincinnati because you ran the football over 50 times and ran it for almost 300 yards. There was no reason for him to put the ball in the air. And this one, he still threw for almost 400 yards this past weekend without his 2 starting wide receivers. And really and truly, Jameson Williams probably scores if he doesn't tear his ACL on that one play. And so you're looking at it, and I know everyone says, "Oh, it's Bama. They got 5 stars on the bench, this and that." It's not an excuse, but he still threw for 400 yards with wide receivers who haven't seen the field all season. So for me, I still think Bryce Young's the best quarterback in the country. I know some Ohio State fans hit me up saying, is that the guy you think's better than CJ Stroud? Until I see CJ Stroud do it without Chris Olave, Garrett Wilson, and Jackson Smith and Jigba and Marvin Harrison Jr., I can't say anybody in the country is a better quarterback than Bryce Young right now.
Yeah, he was still impressive. And the thing about Bryce Young, he's only a true sophomore. So he's still got at least one more year, and he's probably going to be a Heisman finalist next year as well. Now, I do want to talk about Bryce Young a little more, but I do kind of want to talk more about Stetson Bennett. What do you think? I know you're more of a college guy, and it doesn't look like he's going to have a big future in the NFL, but what do you think about his future in the next level?
I mean, maybe a backup, I think at most. I just don't think his skill set can transfer very well. He reminds me a lot of those Alabama quarterbacks from the early 2010s, like the AJ McCarrons, the Blake Cokers, Blake Coker and Blake Sims or Jacob Coker. And I think that's he's a game manager, man. And I don't think that's where the NFL is going. They want big athletic guys like a Justin Herbert. They want guys like a Bryce Young. They want guys like a CJ Stroud, a Lamar Jackson. Look at the best quarterbacks in the league. The only ones who resemble Stetson Bennett are sitting on the bench like a Jake Fromm right now as the backup for the Bills right now, and Josh Allen. I just don't think his skill set transfers. I think he's a very smart kid, very intelligent, a highly accomplished guy. I would not be shocked to see him on a coaching staff somewhere at a high level university, coaching offense, coaching quarterbacks, doing something like that. But maybe a backup a few years in the NFL, but I cannot see him being a star at the next level, in my opinion.
Yeah, because I think the last time I checked his projections, they were somewhere at a day 3, maybe undrafted free agent. But, it was a good way for him to close out his career in college football. Now, Kirby Smart finally has a championship. He finally beat Nick Saban. Where does he rank among coaches? Is he top 5, top 3? Where do you think he ranks among the coaches in college football right now?
Anybody who tells you he's not top 5, I question their college football knowledge. I wouldn't take anything they say about college football seriously if you tell me Kirby Smart's not a top 5 coach. And really and truly, I would say top 3 right now, no doubt, especially if you add in recruiting, man, because that guy is the only person who can out recruit Nick Saban year in and year out. And he's doing it at a high level and what he's built at Georgia, because I don't think people realize where Georgia was at the end of Mark Richt's tenure. Kirby Smart came in, and that first year Georgia team was very young. They lost to Vanderbilt, lost to Tennessee. I mean, they had a really rough stretch. I believe they also lost to Florida that year. It was not a great year for Georgia in Kirby Smart's first year. It really was saved by that Auburn upset that year. But for me, there's no question he's top five. He's right up there with the Jimbo Fishers, the Dabo Sweeneys, the Nick Sabans, whoever you want to put in that top five, I'm fine with. But for me, Kirby Smart has to be in the discussion as one of the best coaches in college football.
Yeah, and it's with Kirby Smart. The only thing he hadn't accomplished, of course, is beating Nick Saban. He had almost done everything you needed him to do. And, of course, after that interception, you could tell how excited he was because, he finally got the win. So I thought that was great to watch. So now let's talk more about Alabama. Do you think, I'm assuming they're going to be ranked number one again. And I'm assuming you think they're going to be back as well. I mean, what do you think about Alabama's chances of winning the championship next year?
Now, can I go ahead and put my prediction in that Alabama is going to win the title? I feel pretty confident. Whatever the betting line is, go ahead and put 100 on it, because you're going to have a pissed off Nick Saban who just got beat by, entering the year, Nick Saban never lost to an assistant, and now he's lost to one to a national title. I got a feeling he's going to come back extremely motivated. And on top of that, you've got Bryce Young returning. Now there's rumors that Jamison Williams and John Mechie are both returning because of their injury. You have the running back room that's going to be loaded with young talent. The tight ends and Cameron Latu's coming back. You have 3 5-star offensive linemen sitting in the wings behind Evan Neal and some of those guys. On defense, Will Anderson comes back. Don't forget that. Yes, the Will Anderson that was going to be a Heisman candidate. He's back because he's only a sophomore. Your linebacking core is young. Your secondary was brutally young. So you're going to return almost everyone in the back end of the defense. That team is going to be so stacked, along with the number 2 recruiting class in the country coming in as of right now. Man, Alabama should be, I don't care about the defending national champions, anything like that. Alabama is going to be the number 1 team in the country come August, and that team is going to be terrifying next year.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. They've had the college football playoff now 9 times, and 8 of the 9 times Bama has been it, and they have been the championship at least, I think, 5 times, or I think even more. But yeah, I agree with you there. I think Bama's they're going to be another favorite again next year and probably are going to play the championship again. What about a team like Drop Off last year? Do you think they'll be back in the college football playoff next year?
You cut out, did you say Clemson?
Yeah, that's my bad. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, for me, I don't think it's a guarantee, because Pitt they're replacing Kenny Pickett with Keaton Slovis, who was a stud at USC at the quarterback spot before Jackson Dart came in and took over his spot and he got hurt. And then on top of that, I think Miami is going to be terrifying next year with Mario Cristobal. And then also De'Aaron King got hurt, and that may have been the best thing for that program, because Tyler Van Dyke played out of his mind down the stretch for Miami. They beat 2 straight top 20 teams, one on the road, and Miami was doing huge things on the football field late in the season. It almost saved Manny Diaz his job, but Mario Cristobal is that guy. He's won multiple Pac-12 titles. He was Nick Saban's right-hand man when Alabama was making that run through the 2013, 2014, 15, 16 season. Mario Cristobal is going to have Miami terrifying with this recruiting class they have coming in. And then also, I think the overall, the ACC is taking a step forward. Virginia Tech should be really good next year. They just got a new coach. Virginia hired Tony Elliott from Clemson to take over the program. I think there's going to be some real contenders next year. And Wake Forest with Dave Clawson had an outstanding year. They returned a lot of talent. I believe Sam Hartman's coming back too at the quarterback spot there. So for me, I don't think Clemson's going to have an easy walk back to the playoffs. And the number 1 thing they have to do is solve their quarterback issue. And I don't think they've done it as of right now.
Yeah, and what about the new coaches? Now, Marcus Freeman at Notre Dame, Brian Kelly at LSU, Brent Venables at Oklahoma, and of course, you just talked about Mario Cristobal at Miami. How well do you think those coaches will do? Because I think Marcus Freeman's going to do great at Notre Dame, but what do you think about all the new coaches?
I'll start with Marcus Freeman. I think that was the best hire of the offseason. In
Hmm.
my opinion, I love Marcus Freeman. I love what he does. And as soon as as soon as they didn't fire, but as soon as Brian Kelly left for LSU, I was screaming on my show for Marcus Freeman to get that job. And I'm so glad they pulled the trigger, and he deserves it. That guy is going to be amazing. I know they lost the bowl game to Oklahoma State, but if you just look at the energy that team plays with under him and the recruiting that he's done at Cincinnati, his 1 year at Notre Dame as the D coordinator, man, I'm very, very excited to see what he can do at Notre Dame with the backing that he has with the boosters and the alumni support and the player support that he has. He is just a player's coach. That coaching staff's so young, man. Marcus Freeman's 35. The offensive coordinator, I'm blanking on his name. Tommy is Tommy something, but he's 29 as offensive coordinator. So they got a young, energetic staff. I think Notre Dame is in for big things under Marcus Freeman. Now, some of the other ones, Brent Venables is a good hire. He was been a coach at Oklahoma before. He knows the landscape. He worked closely under Bob Stoops, who's now going to be in an advisor role for the Sooners. I think that's a great hire. I do like Mario Cristobal to Miami too. Getting somebody who could get the alumni to donate the money to build a new stadium, upgrade the facilities, everything like that is huge. And apparently in his contract, he worked out details where the university has committed millions of dollars for facility upgrades moving forward. I love that. And so for me, I think that was an A+ hire. And the other one, Brian Kelly to LSU, I'm skeptical. There's been a lot of transfers. I don't love how his personality fits with what LSU is gonna need there, and I really just don't know if he's going to be the coach to bring LSU back. He's a great coach, I get it, but for me, I just don't think he fits the brand of LSU very well, and I think it's going to be very interesting to see how he recruits the state of Louisiana, because that is the number one thing you have to do as the head coach of Louisiana State University is recruit your home base, build a wall around New Orleans, build a wall around Baton Rouge and Southern Louisiana. Can he do that? I don't know, because he's never coached below the Mason-Dixon line. That's going to be a big task there for Brian Kelly.
Yeah. And I was surprised too that he decided to leave Notre Dame to go to LSU, but I mean, we'll see how it goes because of course he's getting a big payday. So another guy that just got fired, and I just got done making a video of him. Urban Meyer was with the Jaguars. He's no longer there. It clearly showed that he's just built for college, not the NFL. There's been rumors that people have said that they're within a year or two, he could be going possibly back to college. What do you think about his chances of going coaching back in college football?
Um, I mean, personally, I think it depends on him, to be honest. I really question whether he wants to coach anymore, man, or whether he has the drive or the want to coach. It really looked like, and I mean, I say this concerned. I'm not trying to make a joke out of it, but he looked like he tried to get fired from
Mm-hmm.
Jacksonville, really and truly. I mean, every move he made, every comment he made, it looked like somebody trying to get out of a situation. They like, you ordered the most outrageous thing on the menu and you realize you're not that hungry and you're like, oh, well, okay, well, what do I do now? Like I don't know how I'm going to attack this. And he just bit off more than he can chew, I think, with the NFL. And with the NFL, you have a long off season. Coaches are allowed to go on vacation. Coaches are allowed to take some time off because you're not recruiting in the off season. I don't think he's ready for the grind. If he goes back to college, I hope it's a mid-major where he, doesn't have to face the pressure of, I mean, I don't think he's built for the SEC life anymore. Because when you go to a Florida, when you go to an Auburn, when you go to an Alabama, an LSU, and Texas A&M, you got so much pressure, so much responsibility, and it's a grind. You have to fight negative recruiting. You got to recruit year round. And with the transfer portal, which is something that really wasn't the biggest factor for him when he was a college coach, I don't know how he would handle that, because now recruiting isn't just in high schools, isn't just in isn't in the JUCO level. You got to recruit your own players now. And
Mm-hmm.
I just don't know if he's ready for that, man. The motivation, the lack of energy I saw from him at the professional level, I don't think anyone should take a waiver on him until he's recommitted himself to the game of football.
Yeah, and I've heard some rumors about it, but if I was an athletic director, I wouldn't hire Urban Meyer. I mean, he has so much baggage too, and yeah, you mentioned the transfer portal thing. Now he would hate that, and yeah, it just doesn't seem like he's very motivated anymore. And he's basically done. He's won what, three national championships, two at Florida, one at Ohio State. He really doesn't need to do anything else. But speaking of the transfer portal, Caleb Williams is leaving Oklahoma. I was surprised to hear that. Is there a chance that he goes to USC to follow Lincoln Riley?
I would say it's probably 100% sure, and I don't like putting 100% on anything, but he's going to Oklahoma. Jack's, Dart entered the transfer portal. They don't have a quarterback. He's going to USC. Now it's just going to come down to when is he going to announce it. I don't see anybody else in the race. He was at the Rams game this past weekend. He's been in LA. He's been around the program. He knows Lincoln Riley. Spencer Rattler went to their rival school. It's almost it's as close to 100% as you absolutely can make it right now that he's going to USC.
And now you said, or you just mentioned Jackson Dart now is leaving USC, and he was a pretty good quarterback. I think he was a four-star recruit, and he played all right last year for USC. Where do you think he ends up for next year?
I think he stays out west. I think BYU could be an interesting location for him because I think that coaching staff has the history now where they can say we can do with you what we did with Zach Wilson. And they're very similar players of that gunslinger type with the outrageous confidence with the big arm. I think BYU is a good choice. They really need a quarterback moving forward. And I think he fits that system very, very well out there. So if I had to put my money on it right now, I would say it's probably going to be BYU for Jackson Dart.
Yeah, and I think in 2024, BYU is making the jump to the Big 12, correct? So I think Jackson
Yes.
Dart would be a senior by then, right? If he decided to stay
Mhm.
all 4 years. Yeah, that would be very interesting. And Spencer Rattler is another guy. He went to South Carolina. How well do you think he'll do? Of course, I think he mostly went to South Carolina because of Shane Beamer. How well do you think Spencer Rattler will do at South Carolina?
I think it's a huge upgrade from what they had. I mean, they haven't had a good quarterback in a long time over there for the Gamecocks. I think he fits Beamer's system. He's familiar with most of the coaching staff. I think he does well, but we saw him struggle with SEC type defenses. When you look at what Dave Aranda did to him, Dave Aranda is the quintessential SEC guy coming from LSU, came from Wisconsin before that. He's just one of those tough, physical. He has his defenses flying around, and is he going to be ready to face that week in and week out? Because LSU's defense not slouching, Texas A&M's defense definitely not slouching, Alabama, Georgia, Florida at times. I mean, you're going to have to face some dogs on the defensive side of the ball. Is he ready for the SEC grind? Would be my only choice, but I think it was a great decision by him to go with a coach he's familiar with, a coach that knows what he needs as a quarterback, what he's comfortable with. And I think it's going to go a long way in helping his career and hopefully reinvigorating his career moving forward.
Yeah, because he kind of had a disappointing year, gets benched for Caleb Williams. Now it looks like, as you mentioned, Williams is going to USC. And I forgot to mention, but Lincoln Riley now is at USC. Is USC finally back? Are they finally where they were, 20 years ago?
I think Oregon losing Mario Cristobal probably. I think USC right now has to be the favorite. I don't, but you still have Utah who has a lot of talent. Kyle Whittingham is the one of the longest tenured head coaches in college football. Utah is always in the running there. They got a great culture out there in Salt Lake. But for me, USC is the future of the Pac-12. If he can bring that offense and some sort of defense to USC, I have no doubt that they can be in the playoff push within a year or two from now and moving forward until Lincoln Riley decides to take his talents elsewhere.
Okay. And now I got one more or actually two more questions for you. The first, you kind of already answered. Do you think Bama's going to win next year? Do you have maybe, I know this is really early, but do you have a maybe early Heisman prediction or?
Oh, that's tough. That's tough. I think CJ Stroud's going to be in the running. I don't think you can go wrong with that pick at all. But I think Bryce Young will still be in it. But I'm going to go. I'm going to go with the outside pick, and I know a lot of people are going to be like, very weird pick. I'm going to go with Bijan Robinson at Texas right now. I think the addition of Quinn Ewers is going to make a lot of defenses respect what he can do at the quarterback spot. Bijan Robinson has been doing outstanding things on the ground already. Quinn Ewers should be able to increase his receiving stats and receiving touchdowns. He's a special teams guy. I think Bijan Robinson is going to have an insane year in year 2 of that Steve Sarkisian offense. So I think right now, Bijan Robinson would be a very, very dark horse pick for that Heisman.
Okay, wow, I was definitely not expecting that, and I kind of lied here. I do have one more question before we end the interview. What about a guy like Malik Cunningham? He's coming back for one more year. He was really good last year. Now, he did have some games where they didn't play great again, but he looked great against Duke, like the second to last week of the year. He's a pretty good quarterback. What do you think about his chances of winning the Heisman?
I think he's got a lot to fix, man. He's solid with his legs. The thing he has to fix is his consistency and also his effectiveness. There were times where he would be wildly inaccurate with the ball, and you're not winning the Heisman completing 54% of your passes, which we saw in multiple games, and also the turnover bug, man. There's always those 2-3 games a year for Malik Cunningham where he just catches the turnover bug and cannot keep the ball in Louisville's hands. That's got to change, but that's a very, very dark horse candidate for the quarterback spot, but he plays in a big time offense under Satterfield up there in Louisville. I mean, I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility, and you probably would get great odds on that Heisman bet if that's what you're looking for. But I think Malik Cunningham would be a huge dark horse, and also someone kind of down the same line that a lot of people probably don't know about is Cameron Ward. He just committed to Washington State at the quarterback spot. He's a transfer from Incarnate Word at the FCS level in the Southland Conference, was the Southland Offensive Player of the Year. He's the school record holder in only 19 games for passing yards and passing touchdowns for a career. Won the Jerry Rice Award in the spring at Incarnate Word for the best freshman at FCS football. Just had almost 5,000 yards passing, 50 touchdowns, less than 5 interceptions. The kid is a hyper athlete, and he committed to Washington State because his head coach from Incarnate Word just accepted the offensive coordinator job. Washington State plays in a weaker defensive conference, and Cameron Ward no doubt might have the stats to make a bit of a Heisman noise as well.
All righty. Thanks again for the updating on those guys. And before we end the interview, if you want to talk about more about your podcast, what do you have in store in the future? And again, all the links will be down in the description below. But is there anything else you want to add before we end the interview?
No, man. Listen, if y'all love college football content, make sure to subscribe on YouTube. We got great interviews. Malachi Weidman from Jackson State that just won the SWAC championship. We got a runner-up for the Jerry Rice Award, Darius Hell, dropping tomorrow, or if you're listening to this on Wednesday. And then, I mean, man, we got game recaps, all kind of stuff on you can go back, watch, and see our thoughts on all the biggest games of the year, man. So subscribe to us on YouTube. You can catch it all on podcast streaming platforms. And I just want to say, man, thank you for having me again.
Yeah, no problem. It was definitely fun talking, and I can't wait to next time you want to come on. And again, we'll all be, we always like talking college football. So again, thanks for coming on. Again, don't forget to check out the Blue Bloods CFP podcast with Zack McKinnell. All right, again, thanks for coming on, Zack, and have a wonderful night. All righty, I am pleased to be joined by a reoccurring guest, Nicely, from the Ball Fake podcast. How's it going, Nicely?
Not too bad, JJ, and yourself?
I'm doing great. Again, thanks for coming on. Before we start talking about the NBA season, if you kind of want to talk more about your podcast, I know you've came on a few times, so the listeners kind of know who you are. But if you want to talk more about your podcast and stuff like that.
Yeah. I'm the host of the Ball Fake podcast, available on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Pod, any other podcasting platforms. We're getting ready to start revving up with some more of our interviews and stuff. There's recently been a podcast on the rise called the Pick a Side podcast. We're going to have one of their, co-hosts come on the show. We also have plans of bringing on some potential NBA players onto the show. I don't want to disclose the names just yet, just to make sure that they're going to be available at a certain time period. But it's going to be a big month in 2022 with January, February, and March full of interviews and stuff like that. So.
All right. Sounds awesome. Definitely keep an eye on that. I'll begin to put all the links down in the description below. All right. Start with the NBA season. Is there anything that's really surprised you this season?
I think the emergence of the Memphis Grizzlies has definitely been something that, definitely caught my eye. I mean, Ja Morant, in his third year, I expected him to emerge as an all-star. I didn't think that he was going to necessarily jump into this MVP caliber player. I actually as one of my dark horses for the award. But, you know, him with Desmond Bane, they have a great supporting cast. Desmond Bane, I mean, he's a guy that went from 9 points per game. He's averaging 17 currently right now, 42% from beyond the arc. Jaren Jackson has been great on both ends of the basketball. I would love him to, you know, give them a little bit more production on both sides. The offensive end, just, you know, mix it up inside out. And, you know, obviously Dylan Brooks, he hasn't been in the lineup too often. You know, he's kind of up and down sometimes, but I love his defensive capabilities. I think one day he could potentially make 1 or 2 all NBA defensive teams, but, you know, they're well coached. They're way ahead of their rebuild schedule. And, you know, they're 4 games back from first place in the Western Conference. So, you know, the Memphis Grizzlies is the biggest surprise in the NBA to me.
Yeah, and the Grizzlies, the nice part about them, they're really young and stuff like that, fun to watch. And the Western Conference has been weird this year because it's all kind of everybody's kind of you normally see the Western Conference a little more, you know, spread out, but it's kind of all jumbled this year. It's kind of weird. But yeah, the Grizzlies are definitely a team that you need to keep your eye on. Let's talk about one of the big stories right now. Of course, is Kyrie Irving. He's playing. But he can't play home games yet. I did hear some rumors that there's a chance that the Nets might actually pay his fines if he can actually play home games. But let's start with this. With Kyrie Irving playing and only can playing away games, do you think that's a distraction for the Nets as a team?
Well, I mean, as far as a distraction, they're always going to have attention around them just given the names on the roster, Kevin Durant, James Harden, and Kyrie Irving whenever he's available. But I think the only thing that really is going to be an issue is probably, you know, him possibly disrupting the players like a Cam Thomas, Patty Mills. Like I'm a little bit concerned about him. They're playing him a little bit more than they would like to. And, you know, we've even seen that with Kevin Durant, but obviously if Kyrie Irving is going to be there, he's going to alleviate that. But, you know, I think honestly, I don't even know if Kyrie Irving, you know, being able to play home games issue. I mean, defensively on the perimeter, I know they just shut out the Bulls the other night, but defensively on the perimeter, they're a little bit up and down. I mean, I like guys like DeAndre Bembry, but Bruce Brown, he's taking a step back. He's not really getting the amount of minutes that he wants. Patty Mills, I feel like he's being a little bit overworked. And James Harden, I mean, he's been lackluster all season. He's had national televised games where he's been able to, you know, put up some pretty big numbers. I think he just had a triple-double against Chicago the other night. But, I mean, and not to mention, you know, you have Kevin Durant being the anchor of your defense, and you would like guys like Nicholas Claxton and, you know, some of their other interior presence to be a little bit more effective. And I think Nicholas Claxton can be that guy, but, you know, he's just going to have to go through a few growing pains. But I think they have more issues other than the Kyrie Irving thing, so to speak.
And with what all the Nets have had to deal with, and I think Steve Nash has done a pretty good job having to deal with all that, do you think he deserves to be, or at least the front runner for Coach of the Year? I know it's really early, but do you think he needs or deserves to be in the top for the running for Coach of the Year?
I think, you know what? I didn't even think about that. I mean, they are the 3rd best team in the Eastern Conference. Given all the issues that I just listed off, I think you probably should give him that consideration. You know, he's a second-year head coach, dealing on the team, James Harden, Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving, like I mentioned. And, you know, despite all the distractions, despite all the negatives that have happened this season, he's still been able to, you know, kind of coach this team to the best of his ability. And, you know, they're sitting towards the top of the Eastern Conference. So, yeah, I would probably consider him one of the top coaches in the NBA perspective.
Well, the thing about the Nets too is I think it was during Christmas time, like all their players were either on the COVID reserve list or just out injured. So I think what they have done, and again, they still have a chance because I just checked the standings, and of course, this is recorded on Saturday night, and I think the Bulls have the number 1 seed, but they have a barely lead over. I think I'm trying to think now, the Bucks, Nets, and Heat, and I think that might be the way how the top 4 goes, but the East is more competitive than I thought it would be this year. So that's interesting. But let's go a little bit more back to the Kyrie Irving thing. Do you think there's still a chance that Kyrie Irving, despite not being vaccinated, do you think there's a chance of him actually playing home games, maybe in the postseason?
I mean, you would think that he wouldn't be able to, but I mean, we also didn't necessarily, not too many people are optimistic about him being able to play at all this season, given his stance on the vaccine and everything. So, I mean, it's really a toss-up. You never know. I mean, how much can, you know, Kevin Durant and these other guys kind of influence, you know, the front office to make that decision? I guess it might be, you know, it's up to Sean Marks at the end of the day, but I really just don't know where I'm at in those terms. But I did hear some rumors about, you know, them not being able to actually do that. I know you mentioned earlier that they could pay some fines, but I don't know. I've heard some rumors that they weren't allowed to do that, given it's a federal law. So we're not going to figure out until April comes around the corner. So
yeah, it's definitely going to get interesting. And it's just, I mean, even if Kyrie Irving can't play home games, I mean, the Nets are still that talented where they can still win the championship easily, at least in the or at least in the Eastern Conference. Let's jump over to the West real quick. And we were talking about this before we were recording, and this kind of sounds a little bit like a stretch. They started talking about this earlier in the year, but I'm not sure it's actually going to happen. But if the Lakers don't make it far in the playoffs this year and get beat in the first round again, do you think there's a chance that Frank Vogel gets fired or just part ways with the Lakers?
I don't think there's a big chance of that, honestly. I mean, he won you a championship just 2 seasons ago, right?
Mm-hmm.
How many times has a championship coach really gotten fired, especially this soon into his contract? But I think if LA does make a decision like that, you would have to have a particular coach in mind, and research on what coaches are available that I think would mesh well with this unit. Russell Westbrook, Anthony Davis, LeBron James. I wasn't really able to come up with anybody, so to speak. So I think that is something that we have to take note of. And then on top of that, Jeannie Buss, she does have a really good relationship with Frank Vogel. And like I mentioned, I honestly feel like, a lot of the pressure and a lot of the heat that maybe Jeannie Buss in the front office deserve, because if we're being honest, they haven't really given him the greatest personnel for him to really coach his from his perspective, right? Vogel's one of the better defensive coaches in the entire NBA. I mean, just 2 seasons ago, the Lakers were number 1 in defense. And even last year, even though they fell apart, they were number 2 in defense. And now you're seeing them towards like the bottom half of the league from that perspective. And I think that's more a testament of, the lack of good decisions that the front office has made as opposed to, Frank Vogel's coaching just in general.
Yeah, and I think another part why their defense isn't quite as good is because, of course, Anthony Davis is still out, and there's a chance that he comes back in late January or something like that. So that's another big thing as well. Let's stay with the Lakers a little bit. There's been talks about Russell Westbrook getting traded because it just doesn't seem like it's working. Do you still think he's with the Lakers by the time the trade deadline ends?
Yeah, I mean, with Westbrook, it's just such you just don't know where to even start, right? I mean, obviously he's definitely regressed as a player individually, well below league average in terms of shot attempts at the rim. From a field goal percentage standpoint, we understand he's not the best jump shooter in the entire NBA. He likes the mid range, but shooting mechanics aren't great, so to speak. Doesn't have soft touch, kind of shoots the ball on the way down. And, the turnovers have been daunting. And I know a lot of people have been giving him praise about not turning the ball over so much, but I actually would much rather Russell Westbrook to be aggressive and turn the ball over in that process than him not to be aggressive at all. 0 turnovers a game, because it's just not who Russell Westbrook is as a player. But I doubt that he gets traded. I don't think there's too many teams that are necessarily looking for his services, especially at this time during the year, given the fact that, most of these backcourts are kind of settled in. But yeah, I think it's very unlikely you see a Russell Westbrook trade by the trade deadline.
And another point guard that's not playing right now, and he plays similar to Russell Westbrook, and it's John Wall. And it seems like I don't think he's played at all this year, and the Rockets are trying to work out a trade with him. But do you think he gets traded by the trade deadline, or do you think there's maybe a chance that Russell Westbrook and John Wall get swapped? I mean, what do you think about John Wall's future for the rest of the season?
John Wall's an interesting one. I think he's one of those guys that's probably going to get bought out at some point. Not necessarily sure if that'll be this season or next season, but how many years he has left on his contract, so to speak, or?
I am not sure. I think he probably has at least 2 years, maybe 2 or 3 years at least, because he signed a massive deal a few years ago.
Yeah, I mean, I can't see him being traded. I mean, he's kind of like you mentioned. Him, Westbrook have the same issues, so to speak. Not too many teams are really looking at guys like that right now. But yeah, I doubt you see a John Wall trade. You're more likely to see a Westbrook trade than a John Wall trade at this point. But we'll just see.
Yeah, I mean, they both play very similar. They're both really athletic, but yeah, John Wall has just been injured the last few years. And of course, he's with the Rockets, and the Rockets are one of the worst teams in the league. But we'll see what happens there. This is kind of an odd question right now, but it looks like the Clippers aren't going to have Kawhi for the rest of this year. They're not going to. It looks like Paul George could be shut down. and say the Clippers do make the playoffs and somehow Kawhi and PG are able to come back, and say they're like a 7th or 8th seed, should the Clippers try to see what they can do? Or should they bring Kawhi and PG back, or just, keep them on the bench and hope to have a better next year?
I wouldn't be too optimistic about that. I think if you're the Clippers, I think you let some of these local Artensons of the world, BJ Boston's, let those guys kind of develop. Terrence Mann, allow him to continue to develop, grow confidence this season. Use this year as a development year. You don't really have too much to play for, especially if they could potentially fall into like that play-in category. There's not going to be too. I don't think with the teams that for the Western Conference they can compete with them as of right now. And you also have to bring into consideration that Kawhi Leonard, he hasn't played all season. I understand Paul George, you've seen him for some time this year, and he at some point was playing at an MVP level. But, with Kawhi Leonard, you still kind of have to rekindle the chemistry with him and some of those guys on the roster. And judging by the fact that, he's coming off of a very gruesome injury, I would just much rather you wait, have him rehab this offseason, and, just prepare him for next year.
Yeah, and they just brought him back too last year. I think it was like a 4-year, $179 million contract. Might have been 189 or 179 or 189, so somewhere around there. So they still have him for a few more years. But yeah, as much, I'm a huge Kawhi Leonard fan, but I feel like it's not worth it to go out, and especially if they're a 7th or 8th seed, why even try to rush it? They're going to be a lot better next year when Kawhi and Paul George are both healthy. And another question too, and I mean, this is kind of an obvious question right now, but who do you think the MVP is right now if the season ended today?
I have to go with Kevin Durant just because I mentioned, some of the Nets issues earlier in the episode, and I think he's been the one guy that I MVP level consistently, right? Not to say that guys like Jokic and Giannis and those Stephen Curry haven't, but I mean Curry, I originally had him as the front runner. The Golden State Warriors, they were the best team in the NBA at one point. They had a really good streak going, looked really unstoppable, but as of late, since Curry's record-breaking 3-point record, he hasn't really looked like himself, and I think Kevin Durant, given the fact that he's got so much responsibility on the Brooklyn Nets with James Harden not playing up to his standards. The issues with Kyrie Irving. Defensively, he's kind of got to be that anchor alongside guys like Nicholas Claxton. And he's been dealing with a lot of stuff as well. And he's still been able to, allow the Nets to be one of the top teams in the Eastern Conference. I would feel more comfortable saying Kevin Durant is probably the MVP of the season if it were to end today.
Wow. Yeah, and I honestly thought you were going to say Curry, but I'm glad you said Durant because Durant makes a lot more sense for the MVP. But and I put this on a poll question earlier today. And who do you believe Steph Curry is the greatest shooter of all time, or do you think a guy like Ray Allen or Reggie Miller is still the greatest 3-point shooter of all time?
I almost feel like you could break it down into categories. Like I think Ray Allen, he's right up there with him, just in terms of like if we're shoot, I think Ray Allen is top. But it's the fact that Curry can hit you from all angles, catch and shoot. He can score off the dribble from that perspective. He's got the range. Ray Allen, we didn't really see him throw too many 40-foot bombs out there like that, given his era, obviously. But I think, it's probably obvious that Stephen Curry is good, given all of those dynamics.
Yeah, the thing, too, is that, like, even the NBA, 10 years ago when Ray Allen was playing, and I guess he wasn't necessarily in his prime 10 years ago, but it was completely different. I mean, they shot threes, but not like what they do today. So, I mean, it's hard to judge. And I still think Ray Allen's a little more clutch than Curry is because Curry's been with a really good team. But, I mean, Ray Allen was too, but I don't know. I feel like Ray Allen had a little more clutchness to him. But anyway,
he also didn't have the opportunity to shoot 13, 14 a game. Like he didn't necessarily have that type of role on his team to where he was able to do that. I really wonder what he would accomplish had he played a little bit in this era. But I mean, we'll just never know.
And it'd be interesting to see Reggie Miller do the same thing in our era. Like I think he was one of the best shooters before Ray Allen came on the scene. So we'll see what happens. Another question too. Ben Simmons has yet to play at all this season. It doesn't look like he's going to play. He wants out of Philly, but I'm not sure that's right now being the whole drama right now. But do you think Ben Simmons actually plays this year? And do you think he ends up playing with the Sixers or with another team?
I think with the Sixers, it's out of the door. It's out of the window. I mean, that relationship is broken. I mean, Daryl Morey was going to have like a really good shot of getting him back on court. They were able to get him within the facility, got him tested for COVID and everything. I'm not sure if he's vaccinated or not, but I would assume he is, given that, that hasn't really came into, I haven't been hearing any reports about him being unvaccinated. But I mean, the likelihood of any team trading given Daryl Morey's asking prices, I just don't know where I'm at right there. I think you have a much better chance of trading for Ben Simmons in the offseason, given, the season's going to be over. Teams, there might be some teams looking to move on from some of their pieces. I mean, a team like Atlanta, they've obviously been trying to, get into the Sixers for right reasons. Ben Simmons, he would be a really good fit on the Atlanta Hawks alongside guys like Trae Young and the rest of those young assets that they have. But I just don't think that, there's a lot of teams out there that really have the pieces that Daryl Morey's aiming for. He's wanting this all NBA caliber player. He's really telling people that he wants regarding return. But I mean, there actually have been a few teams that I feel like kind of were giving you like fringe all-stars, but Daryl Morey, he's not buying it. And he's kind of one of those tough GMs to negotiate with. I've heard rumors about him being very difficult in the past, but I mean, take that for whatever it's worth. But I doubt you see Ben Simmons play this season.
Yeah, the drama has just not been like, even before, I think it was before the season started, you could tell the drama was there. And I mean, Ben Simmons is a good player, but I think the Sixers made a mistake of placing him as the point guard. I think he should have been a 3 or 4, but that's another discussion. That was with a totally different organization. I mean, Daryl Morey wasn't there. Doc Rivers wasn't there at the time. So I don't know. We'll see what happens with Ben Simmons, but I feel like he would thrive in a smaller market where there's not as much pressure on him. I mean, I think earlier and this is a really big market, but I think earlier before the season started, there was rumors of him going to Golden State because the pressure wouldn't be on him. It'd be on Curry or whenever Klay Thompson came back. But I think he'd do much better in a smaller market. So, I mean,
I mean, given his playoff blunder last postseason, he's going to have pressure wherever he goes, regardless, right? But I think if you stick him in he's maybe not getting too much attention on a nightly basis, he's probably going to have a much better chance of thriving within that organization and, just being a little bit more comfortable. Now, it depends on where you send him to and the personnel of that team and whether or not they're going to decide to, build around Ben Simmons or, make sure that he's really comfortable in that situation. But we're just going to have to wait and see on that one.
Yeah. And I'll definitely be excited or breaking news if he does end up getting traded or if he actually plays this year. Another guy that's finally back is Klay Thompson. It's been 2 years and now he's finally played a few games. What have you thought about his performance so far?
I actually burst from Cleveland, given they don't have great perimeter defense. And their interior defense is what they pride themselves on, obviously. But Klay Thompson shooting well below league average. I think he's shooting below 40% from the field. He's shooting like 22% from three, something like that. I mean, you haven't played basketball in 2 years. Golden State looks a little bit different versus what they looked like last time you were shooting up on the court. And obviously, he's just going to have to work his way into game shape. I think he looks pretty healthy as of right now. My biggest concerns are probably going to be him turning corners. We know Golden State likes to run a lot of pin downs. They're hell bent on their pistol action and, hammer screens and things of that nature. There's a lot of stuff going on off ball, but they haven't really put him in too many scenarios where he's going to have to be sprinting cross court side to side and doing all this good stuff. They're sending him a lot of short pin downs, giving him the ball in isolation, which is something I think is a little bit interesting in. They should probably look to do that a little bit more often, even when he, March comes around and he's starting to feel a little bit more like himself. But I expect him to pick it up around March, end of February. And, I think Golden State has a lot of things to be optimistic about heading into, the postseason this year.
Yeah. And I think when Klay Thompson came back, that of course was breaking news and stuff like that. And I think it had even been over 2 years, like 2.5 years or something. So
like
yeah, I mean the team's
41 days. Like
it was crazy. And plus, like you said, excuse me, the Warriors are a completely different team than when he played game 6 of the NBA Finals. So I don't know. All right. So you said the Memphis Grizzlies were your most surprising team. What about the most surprising player? What player has been really good that you definitely didn't see coming?
Jalen Brunson out of Dallas. He's been on a tear. He's actually the player that they were requesting to bring in to play alongside Luka. Guy that can run your offense, not be too ball dominant. Luka operating in a pick and roll. And although Luka's had a quiet year and he got off to a slow start, given he just never comes into training camp in shape. Jalen Brunson, he's been able to alleviate the pressure off of him. He's averaging 16 points per game currently. This is a guy that around 11, maybe 12, 13 points per game originally. Efficiency wise, he's not there just yet. I mean, he's still a very young player. He's got some things to tweak within his game and all that good stuff. But what he's been able to do at 6'1" defensively it's astonishing. And I think he's probably, to me, individual wise, out of everybody in terms of the NBA this season.
Yeah, that's a good one. What about the rookies right now? What rookie have you been really impressed with? I know Evan Mobley's been great this year. Cade Cunningham really doesn't have much to work with in Detroit. Jalen Green at times has been good. I mean, what rookie has really impressed you this year?
There's been a number of guys, especially as of late. I haven't been able to watch too many of their games, but Franz Wagner out of Orlando, I would like to see. I got to do a little bit more research on him. I'll be honest. I've watched probably 2 to 3 Magic games, and those are by like 2 quarters or something. And picking up on this year is obviously Scotty Barnes. He's a lottery pick. We expected him to be really good, or at least I did. I wasn't surprised that Toronto took him over Jalen Suggs, given Toronto, they're one of the few programs in the entire NBA. They run this 1 guard, 3 wings lineup that might include a center. So he was also might have been insurance for a guy like Pascal Siakam. We know he was on the trade block all last year. But, outside of Scotty Barnes, I think Evan Mobley, he's also been somebody that has actually surprised me. I wasn't too optimistic about him. I had questions about his motor. I thought he was a little bit slimmer, and I didn't really understand how athletic. But I think he's a really good passer, especially within Cleveland's offense right next to Darius Garland. You can play him high-low with Jared Allen. He's been able to find guys in the in the short corners and things of that nature on kickouts and stuff. But, he's a really good prospect, and we have to be very optimistic about Cleveland's future.
Yeah, it's been a while since we've been able to say that outside of LeBron. So now I forgot what I was going to say. But anyways, oh, yeah, that's right. Toronto has been kind of a team that I'm a little surprised by how good they are. They're actually a borderline playoff team. Washington is kind of the same way, but of course they got a lot from the Russell Westbrook trade. Toronto has been great. We'll see what happens. But yeah, Evan Mobley's been a player that's impressed me. I know he's missed some time because he's either in the COVID protocols or I think he was out with an elbow strain for a few weeks. So that's been definitely what I've been watching. And surprisingly, again, Cleveland, I didn't expect them to do well. And of course, Orlando, it's kind of hard to watch those games because they're never usually on, big time network. But yeah, that's a good one to bring up. I know this is really early. This is kind of similar to the MVP prediction, but if the season do you have a finals projection?
I do actually. We've been talking about a lot. We've been talking about the Nets a lot this episode, and I'm going to bypass that for right now. I think the Milwaukee Bucks make it out of the Eastern Conference this year. I think it's pretty obvious in the West who come out. Phoenix. No, I'm playing the Golden State Warriors. But no, yeah, I think it'll be Milwaukee versus Golden State in the NBA Finals. I think that's an interesting matchup too, because I feel like a lot of people don't really take into consideration how versatile Milwaukee is. I think in order for you to win the championship in the NBA, these be one of those teams that can adapt to anything, right? Whether it's offensively, defensively, and that's in terms of being able to play big lineups, small lineups. I think Milwaukee is one of the few teams in the NBA, along with the Golden State Warriors, that can really, do stuff like that, right? And they have one of the better small ball lineups in the entire NBA, featuring Chris Middleton. Some of their shooters, maybe a Bobby Portis and Giannis Antetokounmpo playing at the center position. And given Golden State, is also one of the better small ball lineup teams in the entire NBA. But I think they have strong and taller wings that can bother a lot of other small ball lineups defensively, especially in the Western Conference against teams like maybe Phoenix, Memphis. I think there's a lot of optimism there. But I think, The NBA Finals prediction for me this year is probably going to be Milwaukee versus Golden State. But that is subject to changing depending on what happens within these next couple of months. But I think I feel pretty confident about that prediction.
Yeah, I think a lot of people would agree with you there. And I mean, there's still a lot, like I said, there's still a lot of basketball left to be played. But at the end of the day, usually you kind of have an idea on who's going to play and who's not going to be in. Before we end the interview, and again, thanks for coming on nicely. I forgot about this, but the Knicks make a trade for Cam Reddish. What did you think about that trade overall? Were you shocked? I mean, what was your reaction to it?
I mean, that's a really good free agency pitch to Zion Williamson. I will say that. But I was surprised that Atlanta gave up so little, right? I mean, I guess they were really not feeling him within that locker room. They've been having issues for like the last 2 seasons. I mean, John Collins, he's been clearly on issues with Trae Young last year. And I think Atlanta's one of the few teams in the NBA that I feel like they have the talent, but it might be too much talent. So it made sense I knew they were going to have to give up one of those guys, right? Cam Reddish is, I think, he's got a little bit of Paul George within his game. I'm not saying he's going to be the next Paul, but I think, him going to New York, an organization that's looking for, an exterior scorer, somebody that can be a little bit versatile, do it all, be reliable from that standpoint. I think he can grow into that. He wasn't really able to showcase that too much, given Trae Young is very ball dominant. And, he didn't really have the ball in his hands too much and not necessarily getting the amount of opportunity that you might have liked if you're a Cam Reddish fan. But I think there's a lot of optimism about him being in New York, especially playing alongside RJ Barrett. I think those two are going to be a really fun tandem. I have questions on whether or not, Julius Randle, he's going to be able to want to share the ball with, some of these young guys like that. And we know Thibodeau, I feel like a lot of people aren't taking this into consideration, but, he's heavily reluctant on his veterans, right? So hopefully there's no issues about Cam Reddish not getting minutes early on. And hopefully, he can work within the rotation and be one of the assets that, Tom Thibodeau favors within the near future and everything. But I think there's a lot of optimism in New York. But the Kevin Knox situation, I mean, I just don't know how to feel about Kevin Knox, right? I think he's got a little bit of potential. There's some things that you can be optimistic about within his game. He's got really good intangibles. He's long wingspan, very athletic. But I just don't know. I haven't really seen him too much. So, but I thought it was interesting that Atlanta gave Cam Reddish up for him rather than maybe a player like from OKC or Detroit maybe. But that's just my opinion.
Yeah. And I was a little surprised too by the trade, but I felt like Atlanta, they had to probably trade one of those guys. And of course, Cam Reddish, they definitely don't want to trade Trae Young. They definitely probably don't want to trade John Collins either. So we'll see what happens there. But again,
they didn't do a great job in terms of, didn't mean to cut you off, but they didn't do a great job in terms of just identifying their talent, right, and their worth, right? They booked up a lot of guys this offseason, and now they're starting to regret that. But hopefully Atlanta can make a turnaround. I thought last year they overachieved. I didn't actually a contending team in the Eastern Conference. And we even saw that a little bit with the New York Knicks. They played really hard in the regular season, but come postseason, they just laid an egg. Didn't have a lot of offensive power within the organization and things of that nature. And I think Atlanta, they kind of drew they drew a good card, right? The New York Knicks, their issues. Philadelphia was one of those teams that I understood was probably going to sit towards the top of the Eastern Conference, but I felt like their offense was a little bit. I didn't like the scheming around Ben Simmons and Embiid, and obviously the spacing is a little bit awkward. But yeah, I mean, unfortunately, the Sixers beat themselves more than the Atlanta Hawks beat these Sixers. If I'm being quite honest, I think a lot of people forget that there was games where Joel Embiid and Steph Curry were the only ones that scored in the second half. They blew an 18-point lead. I think they blew a 26-point lead as well. I mean, if you just clean up your act within those games, you probably win 4-2. But I mean, that's just my opinion. But I think Atlanta's really good. I think some good quality pieces. Hopefully they can get the right head coach in there. I don't know if Nate McMillan's guy. You're starting to see some of the same issues that he had within Indiana here in Atlanta. Hopefully, they can make stuff work.
Yeah, we'll see what happens. And again, there's a lot of basketball left to be played. But again, thanks for coming on nicely. Before we end the interview, do you want to say anything more about your podcast? Anything like that?
Just to make sure to check us out on Ball Fake Podcast. I have a co-host with me, Greg King, and we also have some other people that come on as co-host guest appearances as well. We're available on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and all other podcasting streaming platforms. But yeah, make sure you guys just support the channel. You know, we're trying to make sure that we have a really good year this year and, you know, just grow our brand overall.
All right. Again, thanks for coming on. Again, the links will be down in the description below. Hopefully this comes out Sunday morning, at least the audio version, and the video comes out soon, Sunday or Monday. So again, thanks for coming on nicely and have a wonderful night.